So this is kind of like our guideposts for the community, right? And when we come together, it encourages us to surrender to the flow and bridge the gap between what has been and what will be. And so there's 15 points. These are our values. So it's presence, community, awareness, authenticity, honor, art and science, disruption, natural selection, expansion, patience, play, oneness, love, courage, and let it be.
That was just a little snippet from today's episode of Living in Santa Barbara. I'm your host, Kathy Henry, and today I'm excited to welcome Jacob Tell. He's the founder of District216, along with 2 other businesses. He's here to share his journey and what he's doing here in Santa Barbara with the club.
Oh,
is that
I like
all right?
that. Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
What am I doing in Santa Barbara? So that's a great question.
Yeah.
I came here to UC Santa Barbara in the late 90s. I came for school, but I think there was a kind of magnetic attraction to this geography, to this area. I've been very interested in the history of this place, going back obviously to the Chumash tribe and trying to feel into what it must have been like to be in this geography, way back when. And there's something special about it that energetically matches me and my frequency. So Santa Barbara just seemed like my destined home base. And lucky enough, UCSB accepted me. I don't know that I would have got into that school now. It seems quite challenging, but back then in the late 90s, they let me in.
Yeah, I got in too.
So there you go.
Must have been
We're lucky at that cutoff generation.
the party animal days, right?
Yeah. So I ended up studying film and Black Studies at UC Santa Barbara, and I finished in 2002, and I started my marketing company actually a little bit before that in 2001. And I've been running this marketing agency called Omiracom now for 23 years. So that was kind of my first way of getting my foot in Santa Barbara and staying here, was starting a business, becoming an entrepreneur and starting a marketing agency.
Wait, so did you feel that pull in terms of the Chumash and stuff when you were in school, or did that happen after?
I mean, there was something about visiting that I felt, not having the context of the historical, understanding or anything yet, but just more of an energetic pull. Uh-huh. And then as I started doing more research and reading the history and talking to people that had been here for a while, I think that kind of rounded out my understanding of maybe why that energetic pull was occurring. It was like, God, I just envisioned like being in these special power spots, like on the Mesa up on the 154, and just looking out over this land back before it was developed.
Yeah.
And
so
thinking about
spots.
going to the islands, on canoe, and thinking about just what it could have been like to live in this place pre-Western culture.
It is gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every day it blows me away.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
And we've done a decent job at keeping it relatively,
yeah,
not too tall with skyscrapers, but yeah.
So you started with marketing, and now you have a company called District216. So what is District216 and LoDo Studios? You started LoDo Studios.
I'll back up to the pandemic. The pandemic kind of reset a lot for so many people, including Omiracom, the marketing company, which, by the way, the word Omiracom, it means communicating dreams. Oniric is like a Greek word that's pertaining to the dreams, dreamlike space and time, and calm, communicating. We just made that up. So Omiracom's communicating dreams. It's what we do for our marketing clients. And we started in music, and we work with all sorts of brands, from music to cannabis to professional services to nonprofit. So we have this, pretty active team, and the pandemic hits and they all go away. We're in this building that we're sitting in today down on Gutierrez Street, and it becomes empty. And it was a freak out moment. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
How are we going to pivot?
A lot of freaking out during that time.
What are we going to do with this space? There's so much overhead to cover, and there's no humans here. Why do I even have this lease anymore? What's the point of all this? Uh-huh. And so after brainstorming with partners and thinking a bit outside the box, it started with like, let's rent out some spaces where we're social distanced and far enough apart so people felt safe. And then it turned into A lot of nonprofits in Santa Barbara don't have a way to do their gala events. You know what? They can do these via live stream. They can actually raise funds by doing their gala events that were once in person, doing them online and live streaming them. And so we provided the space and the technology and the team to live stream. And we ended up doing about 36, I think, gala events for nonprofits over 14 months coming out of the pandemic. And so doing that, and then eventually photo and video shoots here. And then when COVID restrictions lifted, event rentals, we went, wait a second, we actually have a little separate business from Omiracom. It's a event rental and production studio. Let's call it something. And we ended up branding it LoDo Studios. Again, stands for Lower Downtown. And that opened up kind of out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big space. I haven't even done the tour yet, but
we'll do the
I'd
tour.
love to see it. Yeah.
We'll do the tour. We have, we just actually opened up, funny enough, we're doing a podcast in this room. We opened up a podcasting studio a few weeks ago. And again, we do a lot of photo and video content out of the space. And then our whole parking lot converts into a venue. We do music and comedy and all sorts of things out there.
Great.
Yeah.
So how did District 216 come about? What started that?
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from?
I mean, it's probably been germinating for a couple of decades as I've, loved producing events. I put on festivals, and also on the entrepreneurial side, we've worked a lot with UC Santa Barbara, like the technology management program and other startup incubator type situations where we've hosted discussion panels. And so having this background of like education and community building, and then on the other side, media and festivals and events, again, with that pandemic fog and that new mindset, I had some friends saying, like, you love putting on events, you love building community. Why don't you figure out how to do this more? Mm-hmm. Which has been definitely a part of my ethos. And having now LoDo Studios as a physical venue, a space, having an Omiracom, obviously, to help market whatever new venture might come about. Kind of the one piece that was missing was the business model. And when I was in Denver, going to some music with some friends, they pointed out a venue that was doing late night music events. They actually had like psilocybin mushroom type events. And I was asking, how are they getting away with this out there? This is before they changed their law on decriminalization of psilocybin. And they said they have a social club. They're doing a membership model. Mm-hmm. And that's when the light bulb went off. And I went, you know what? I want to do a membership model of some kind. Not exactly that, but something more educational. We call it edutainment. So it's education meets entertainment. And out of that was born District 216.
So if you were to tell somebody what District 216 is in a couple of sentences, what is District 216?
At the end of the day, it's a community. This community, we do call it a psychedelic social club. And I know that we've had a little conversation about what does that exactly mean? It might connote, the wrong thing. Maybe people think that it's just a place for people to come get high.
Yes.
But I think with a little bit of digging in, coming to an event, seeing our content on the web, they'll realize that what we're doing is creating a place for connectivity, for healing, for consciousness expansion, and education. And so we have two major types of events. We have our Wednesday night weekly events. These are usually between 20 and 40 people. And we have 4 different kinds of event formats. We'll either do an interview with a presentation, we'll do a roundtable conversation, a documentary screening, or a workshop. And again, small, intimate group. If there's an interview, we're filming that content, editing it, and putting it into our online platform. And then our online members have all this content they can go back and see. So even if people weren't at the event physically on a Wednesday night, they can watch the interviews later. And then the second event type we have are our marquee events. These are bigger 250 plus person events here in the space. Again, parking lot converts, and it's a 2-part event. The first part's seated. It's all content, a fireside chat, a discussion panel, some kind of a topic. And then we get rid of the chairs and it turns into live music and food and networking. The last event we had was on veterans, PTSD, and psychedelics. Mm-hmm. The next event we have coming up on May 18th of this year is music and psychedelics, and the center point of healing and creativity.
Okay. I'll try to make it.
I would love to have you. Please.
Okay. So I was saying earlier that I felt like there's a little hurdle in terms of the name, because you call it District 216, a psychedelic social club. And so when people hear that, the first impression that comes to mind is that everybody's over here getting high, on psychedelics. But that's not the case. What I'm finding out is that it's a venue for socialization. It's a network where people can come together and get educated on the benefits and the uses for psychedelics, which isn't necessarily drugs.
Correct.
Uh,
Psilocybin mushrooms is one very popular compound. But to your point, there's a lot of conversations around what we call non-ordinary states of consciousness, which can be achieved through breath work, meditation, yoga, exercise, all sorts of forms. And so a lot of the talks we have aren't just specifically on psychedelic compounds or psychedelic drugs, but they're around the culture or around the practice of opening up ourselves and expanding our consciousness through a plethora of different forms.
Yes. So District 216 is really more of a social club for the expansion of consciousness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just psychedelics.
That's correct.
Yes.
I would say the common thread through everything absolutely is consciousness expansion.
Yes. And so what is consciousness? It's a very cliche term these days. It's being thrown around a lot.
It is. It's funny. We have in our interviews, we call our interview series the Change Your Lens series, because we're trying to have people have a shift in the way they see reality or see themselves within the context of reality. And we have a series of questions we call the Change Your Lens questions that we ask all of our guests at the end.
Yes.
And one of those questions is exactly that. What is consciousness? And the answers that we've received from people are fascinating and wide ranging. And there's not a very simple answer. I think if I was to boil it down, I would start with the word awareness.
Yes,
I think if the question of, does a rock have consciousness? Does an animal have consciousness? Or is it just, humans that have developed language? Are we the only ones that experience consciousness? I don't have an answer for that, but we certainly have awareness that we have awareness.
Yes.
We are aware that we are aware.
Yeah.
And so there's some level of consciousness just in that essence. But I think it goes much deeper and broader than that. We can, wax poetic probably for quite a while, but it is an interesting question.
Well, one of the things it's not is rigidity. And it seems like that is what's causing a lot of division in the community, is this concept of rigidity and holding on to old patterns of old ways of thinking.
Yes, like a black and white.
Exactly.
1 or 0, us and them. I agree. I think that the more open, the more consciousness expansion we might have, whether that's through psychedelics or other methods, meditation and prayer and breath work and all these things, is living more in the quantum and realizing that it's yes and no simultaneously. It is there and here at the same time. It is 1 and 0 at the same time. So I think there's an interesting way to see human evolution of our minds moving more towards the quantum, the gray, the yes and, not just the either or.
Well, I mean, people can stick to whatever pattern of thought they have, but at least be open to listening to other perspectives. And by coming to these events, you learn. And so if you're just open to learning, you can still have your opinion,
100%.
but at least come and listen and hear what other people have to say about, for psychedelics. I think there's a fear, or there's maybe a stigma associated with psychedelics. They think it's a drug, but it's not necessarily a drug.
It can be a tool and a portal, opening yourself to a whole new way of seeing the world and thinking about yourself in it. I think to your point around, how we approach the conversations, I've been told by members that there's great healing just in coming and having their stories heard and shared. So some people in their 70s and above that are members of our group, and we are very wide age range, by the way. We've got from 30s, I would say, to 80s is our core range. We do have multiple demographics in terms of age. And some of the older members, they don't necessarily have friends or family that want to hear their psychedelic story
Yes.
or understand or want to understand it.
Will they be willing to come to an event here?
And when they do come, if they are willing and they share or they hear others share, they feel a sense of safety and they feel a sense of healing in that practice.
Yes.
Which I think is something that I didn't necessarily know would happen when I started District 216, but that feedback keeps me going. That's what lights me up, and that's what fuels me to keep this entity rolling.
So I learned that you have a manifesto for District 216.
We do.
Yeah. Okay. So District 216 is not really what they think it is. Like we said, it's an opportunity for people to learn and get educated. But there's also a manifesto. What's the manifesto?
There is. It's really a core set of values. For me, I wanted to have some framework because this is such a delicate ecosystem, the psychedelics ecosystem. I don't want to call it an industry yet. And there's a lot of people pushing back, not wanting it to really become an industry, because once it becomes an industry, the powers that control that industry now all of a sudden threaten maybe some of the more indigenous practices or some of the more, community practices that we have within.
It turns capitalistic.
Correct.
We don't want the capital.
So I like the word ecosystem for now. I mean, there certainly are, studies that are happening. And because when those studies, they turn into clinical trials and those clinical trials turn into pharmaceutical research and that turns into, drugs that can be sold for lots of money. So let's not kid ourselves to think that, this isn't going that way, because obviously we're seeing ketamine, being such a huge industry as the one Schedule 3 legal accessible psychedelic. But as the others become researched and legal, we have MDMA around the corner through all the MAPS FDA clinical trials. They're going to be discussing the outcomes of that on August the 9th of this year. And we could very soon know how MDMA can be prescribable for PTSD in the United States as a federally prescribable compound. However, putting all of that aside, looking at this as an ecosystem, I think is the right lens at this time, because it really thinks about the stakeholders that are in and around psychedelics, from, again, indigenous community practices, recreational groups of friends. I mean, the idea that we can grow our own mushrooms and control our own medicine that way and gift it to our community is something that, a legalization initiative may actually threaten. So things like decriminalization have become our focus. We're actually working on a decriminalization initiative here in Santa Barbara for the city to decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi, psychedelic plants and fungi. And that seems to be the approach that we need to take first.
Yeah. I mean, alcohol is legal.
Don't even get me started.
Prozac.
Yes, you're speaking my manifesto language right now.
So why is it okay to get shit-faced on alcohol, but not microdose on mushrooms? Or why is it okay to get addicted to Prozac? I mean, I think that screws people up more so than,
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a real answer to the hypothetical, we go back to Nixon and we go back to war on drugs, and we look at that they were threatened by psychedelic use because it opens up our minds. It lets us think. It lets us connect with each other and ourselves and reality in a way that alcohol numbs us. Alcohol makes us a more controllable and stupid society.
It does make people stupid, doesn't it?
And the powers that be like that.
Yes. Could you tell us what the manifesto is? Can you
actually go through it?
Oh, a couple. Yeah. Just like so people can have an idea of like the mission of District 216.
Yeah. And in fact, just a side on that, my father is the inspiration for this. I lost him to cancer in 2022, and he was a writer. And I just one day kind of, as I was starting District 216 and knew that I wanted to have a manifesto, just felt a channel of information kind of come through him, maybe from him. I don't know. I won't read every single word of it, but
Sure.
I'll go through just what the concepts
gist,
are.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like our guideposts for the community, right? When we come together, it encourages us to surrender to the flow and bridge the gap between what has been and what will be. And so there's 15 points. These are our values. So it's presence, community, awareness, authenticity, honor, art and science, disruption, natural selection, expansion, patience, play, oneness, love, courage, and let it be. And please go to the About page on district216.com if you want to read details on any of those.
Yeah. So that's the mission of District 216. Yeah. That's why you guys exist.
Yeah. I mean, those are our values. And then we actually do have, like, I'll just read our mission, since you mentioned that word, as well. We're centered around community healing and consciousness expansion through art, music, cannabis, and psychedelics. Our mission is to cultivate lively communities of psychedelics pioneers that exchange ideas, explore health innovations, author new policies, and grow the ecosystem into a thriving industry. Our long-term vision is to advance the full legalization and normalization of healthy psychedelics use in our daily lives worldwide.
Thank you. What is considered a psychedelic? So people, I mean, there's ketamine. Is there a list that you could just share with us real fast?
And it's funny because ketamine, being the one Schedule 3 accessible, is technically a dissociative. So it's not a tryptamine. It's not a classic, quote unquote, classic psychedelic. Classic psychedelics are more like psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, mescaline, which can be found in cactus and peyote, or in San Pedro cactus and Wachuma cactus, 5-MeO-DMT found in the Sonoran Desert toad. These are sort of more of the, DMT is also an active ingredient in ayahuasca. You've probably heard a lot of people going to retreats and trying ayahuasca and these sort of plant medicine contexts and ceremonies. But ketamine is also considered part of this because even though it's a dissociative, you can have a quite profound and very psychedelic outcome or experience when doing a certain dosage, a certain level of ketamine-assisted therapy.
And what is the goal of doing a psychedelic?
Great question. Goal really goes to this concept of intention. People that approach psychedelic use with reverence and respect will be setting an intention going into their experience. Intentions can be very wide-ranging. Some people on the recreational end, they want to have fun. They want to connect with friends. They want to connect with music. They want to, have a good time. When it comes to interpersonal development, a lot of people want to maybe, see things in their lives a different way, or maybe like process through different issues or ideas that they have about how they show up in the world. Then there's the therapeutic uses, and in setting an intention around maybe something around depression or anxiety, or some trauma that you're trying to work through on a therapeutic level. And then there's medical uses as well, where you're actually in with doctors, and some of these can be used for physical symptoms, not just mental health related. And so there's a wide range of intentions that you can set, and many reasons that people do use psychedelics or may be curious to try psychedelics. So I would say consult with, any sort of mental health professionals in your network, in your world, any friends that may have been involved in this space, any practitioners or guides, if you're kind of curious about what an entry point is. And then of course, come to one of our District 216 Wednesday nights, and there's a lot of people here that can chat with you.
Yeah, I mean, you've vetted a lot of these people that are showing up to the panels. So if you're curious about it, it might be a good place to start.
Absolutely. I mean, the panels and the interviews are fantastic to talk to experts. And then we also have members and guests that come to our events that are very knowledgeable. Maybe they've been doing this medicine work for decades, or maybe they've been working. We even have some folks that have come from the lab side that have been working in neuroscience and working on the biology end of the spectrum. It's fascinating.
Do you know people that it's had a profound effect on them?
Myself, many of my life partner, many of my friends. Yeah, absolutely. Many of the members that attend our events. Yes,
So you've seen that it works.
it can. It's not, there's no silver bullet. I think I've already mentioned intention, which is critical. And the other thing I would want to talk about, there's two other things. One is set and setting. I want to briefly go into that. And then the third would be integration. So intention, again, just to recap on this, is sort of three parts. Before you go into your experience, you want to make sure that you understand why you're going into your experience. It doesn't mean that if you, by setting an intention, that's what you're going to get out of the experience. You'll be given an experience and it will be maybe what you need, but not necessarily what you asked for.
Yeah, that's what.
So even setting an intention doesn't mean that's the path you're necessarily going to go down.
Yeah.
But it is good to voice your intention, I think, in life for anything you're doing, regardless of if it's a psychedelic experience or otherwise. Set and setting is critical. Your mindset, your environment, when you're going in, are you around trusted people? Are you in a really comfortable place? Do you have all the accoutrements of a good experience? This is maybe a 4 to 6 hour long or even longer, LSD and other mescaline, you can be 8 to 12 or even longer than that hours. And so you want to make sure that everything's taken care of so that you can just stay in that space for as long as you can. And then most importantly, afterwards, within that 24 to 72 hour period, our brains are experiencing a state of neuroplasticity. And we have the ability to really learn and apply what we've learned in creating new neural pathways and actually molding the way that our synapses are firing and wiring in a new way. And this is exciting, but it also requires, talking to professionals, talking to therapists, maybe that already know you, or integration therapists that are very specific to the psychedelic realm. And also integrating other ways, like integrating with your partner, integrating through journaling, integrating through somatic movements or music or other things that are inherent to what you love. And so I think when you come out of an experience, integration can be something that really cements your experience in and makes you, think about it. And by the way, integration isn't some magical thing that happens once and is done. It can be a lifelong process that unfolds. I mean, there could be something that comes up from an experience that you had years ago, and it's taking you 3, 4, 5, 10 years to finally go, oh my gosh, I just realized what I learned from that experience. And now I can figure out how to integrate it into my life.
Go down that path.
Yeah.
Yeah. So intention is really important. You can't just go do a journey lightly. There's planning and intention involved with that is the recommendation.
I think if you're approaching it from a therapeutic standpoint or a medical standpoint or a ceremonial standpoint, absolutely. There is definitely a recreational approach to psychedelics that people, do these for festivals or raves or music events or other types of social settings where you still should have an intention going in, but maybe it's a little bit of a lighter intention because you're doing this for something as more of a group or community, not to diminish that experience. You can actually get just as much healing and just as much personal development out of a recreational experience as you can one of the others.
What are the risks? I mean,
Great question.
Have there been any negative impacts that you know of?
Absolutely. So, well, medically speaking, and I'm not a physician, so please do your research and please talk to experts if you are planning to do an experience with a certain compound.
Yeah. By the way, we're not promoting that you do it. This is all for informational purposes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we had at our Veterans PTSD and Psychedelics event, a conversation around a very powerful compound called ibogaine, or iboga, which is a root that's found in Africa. And this is a psychedelic experience that can last from 24 to 48 hours. I mean, this is the longest known psychedelic experience, I believe. It's a very long experience, and it's being used for alcoholism and opioid addiction. And people that are, and actually PTSD for veterans as well. But a lot of the times there's a comorbidity with alcohol or pill use because they're trying to numb the post-traumatic stress that they've experienced, right? So this ibogaine, it can be an extremely powerful compound. However, there's a small percentage of people with certain heart conditions where it can provide and there's been some deaths, and it can produce heart issues in a certain population. So in that context, you want to make sure that you're absolutely with a physician, that you do your pre-check, etc. The same goes when you're going in for like a ketamine assisted therapy session. They will take your blood pressure, they'll look at your vitals, they'll talk to you about your former history with drug or psychedelic use to kind of get a sense of where you are on that spectrum, and they'll figure out your dosage accordingly. So there are definite risks that you want to be aware of when it comes to like classic psychedelics. Again, talking about psilocybin mushrooms and LSD and mescaline and DMT. These are non-toxic compounds. These are not like alcohol or cigarettes or, these are things that actually, I don't even know if they've measured the amounts you would have to take some ridiculous, insane amounts for it to actually impact you on a physical level. Mm-hmm. However, the risks are more on mental health side of the equation. So if you're predisposition for, mania or schizophrenia or some certain mental health conditions like this, you absolutely should be consulting your mental health professional before going into an experience like that. These experiences can trigger some people with like borderline personality or schizophrenia to have a really challenging experience, and actually that can persist afterwards. And so there is that risk. But if you're talking about the healthy normal population, mm-hmm. for the most part, mm-hmm. the risks are very low. If you're setting intentions, you have a very safe environment, set and setting, and you've got someone there that's sober, that's trip sitting with you, the risks are fairly low for the healthy, normal population.
Is there a risk of addiction?
These are arguably, these are being used to get people off of addiction. So now anything can be psychologically addictive. Absolutely. I mean, people get addicted to doing repetitive things, whether they're putting things in their body or not. So yes, people can become, I guess, addicted to the process. But in general, no, these are non-addictive, non-toxic compounds. I'm talking about the classic psychedelics. Mm-hmm. Now, with ketamine use, recreational ketamine use, not the intramuscular injections at a higher dosage where you're with a doctor and a nurse, but I'm talking about recreational people snorting lines of ketamine at parties and raves and festivals and things like that. There has unfortunately been, yes, people that have become addicted to that, and there's been some sad outcomes in that realm. So be careful with recreational ketamine use, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anybody that's addicted to, psychedelics, but, it doesn't seem like it's a common thing. But
it's not common, no.
I know that they were using it. There's been some research using lion's mane for Alzheimer's, like you said, PTSD. And then there's other uses for it too. I was watching the documentary Fantastic Fungi.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that if you are interested, if you want to know more about psilocybin. But so there's a lot of uses for mushrooms besides, oil cleanup, pesticides, helping bees, I guess.
I mean, absolutely. These are, if you think about it, I mean, Fantastic Fungi is an incredible documentary. Louis, the filmmaker, I had the honor of actually interviewing at the Illuminate Film Festival. He re-edited and remastered Fantastic Fungi, and we got to see it on the big screen the other week. And I was asked to come interview him after the film, and he's just an amazing, amazing human. In fact, the time lapse that is included in that film, he had filmed over the course of like decades. I mean, just amazing time lapse of fungi and plants and just beautiful stuff. But these fungi have been on this planet longer than any living thing. I mean, technically we've all evolved out of fungi. They predate all animals and all plants.
Well, and also the indigenous people have been using it for a long time. They showed the I guess little mushroom statues from the Mayans. So,
that's right.
And they look like, the mushroom caps look like their brains.
Yeah.
So there's some sort of symbolism in that, I think.
100%. And in the film, they go through the stoned ape theory, right? Which is this this thought that maybe our brains develop so rapidly, so quickly in the evolutionary timescale. How could that have happened? Obviously, we had fire, and because we had fire, we could eat meat, and the meat helped our brain. But they were also saying psychedelic mushrooms. We were eating potentially psilocybin mushrooms, and it was accelerating our brain growth and our consciousness development.
Yes.
Back to consciousness.
Yeah. So let's get back to District 216. So you have events, you said. How often are these events again? And about the membership too? Like,
sure.
Just tell us a little bit about
So
that.
every single Wednesday night we meet. So we have a weekly Wednesday meetup. It's great for real connection. We do networking at the front of the night, and then it goes into whatever the event format is. Again, interviews, workshops, roundtables, or screenings. And then once a quarter, so a few times, 3 to 4 times a year, we've been putting on these marquee events on a Saturday night. Those are the bigger 250 person with a discussion panel, the fireside chat, the live music, the food, the networking, sponsor and vendor booths throughout. And that's, again, once a quarter. So every few months we're doing those. Memberships, we allow guests to come to anything and everything. You can buy a guest ticket to a Wednesday night. You can buy a guest ticket to a marquee event. However, we also sell memberships where you can have either a Wednesday night membership at a lower price. I think it's all on the website, but I think it's $65 a month. And then for the marquee membership, which is all the Wednesdays plus the marquee events, it's $140 a month. And then we also sell online memberships. So if people aren't in and around the Central Coast, or they're not conveniently able to be in Santa Barbara, then we have people from even South America that have online memberships, and you can go on and get the content. We've got about, at least 40 or 50 full interviews. I mean, these are 60 to 120-minute long interviews and discussion panels that are available to watch.
Are there any other District 216s or anything like it outside of Santa Barbara that you know of?
So I'm part of a really amazing group called the GPS, the Global Psychedelic Society. And there are groups from around the world in there, including District 216. Many of them are nonprofit. Many of them are volunteer-based. Many of them meet maybe once a month, or, something like that. In terms of this exact business structure and model, I haven't seen something quite like it. But culturally speaking, yes, there are groups all over the world that are coming together to do this good work, to spread the message, to create community. And my vision and goal is to help coalesce more and more of that. I mean, I do want to open up and operate District 216 locations in multiple cities over time, and to have that one core online offering that connects it all. Online conversations, and obviously all the content that we're filming.
Yeah. How are you going to get the message out to the general public that might be a little skittish about the topic of psychedelics or this club? How are you doing that marketing?
It's a great question. I mean, thank you for including me on your podcast, for example. I definitely am open to doing conversations like this. I've done a couple of podcasts. This is a great format, I think, for getting into it a little bit more than just sound bites. A little bit of press, some articles out there, but I think it's just going to take time and consistency. I think in the beginning, when I launched the idea for District 216, people were kind of like, who is this guy and why does he have permission to do this? Why him, and why is he coming into our space and trying to monetize something that's, sacred? And I think after the first year, which we had done 55 events over the course of year one, people saw that consistency, and they saw kind of the why behind what we're doing. And hopefully those opinions have shifted more into understanding and connecting in. And I say to people that are skeptical, if you've been in this space for a long time and you have a voice, an opinion, and something to offer, we're a container for you. We want you to come in, and we want to host you and come on a Wednesday night and speak and present and educate our members and beyond about what it is that you're knowledgeable about. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. Well, one thing I had a thought. Imagine if everybody was microdosing, what kind of a world would we be?
I would hope a more empathetic world, a more connected, caring, empathetic world. Going back to Fantastic Fungi, one of the key takeaways from that mycelium network, right? That connected underground network of nodes. And really, if you look at the way our brains develop.
Could you tell people what mycelium is?
I mean, that is really the way that fungi connect, grow, and communicate and share information. I mean, mushrooms are just the fruiting bodies that come up from this mycelium network and end up in the in our environment, something we can visibly see, and then that helps, produce spores, which then continue their development.
Yeah, it's like the root system.
It's like the root system, and they connect all the trees and forests, and it's unbelievable. I'll look into mycelium if it sounds interesting to you, because it is fascinating. It is unbelievably fascinating. But as we connect more as a mycelium network, I mean, if you look at the way the internet and our brains are architected and engineered, they mirror in many ways mycelium networks. It's fascinating. But much like that, I hope that we as humans and humanity are able to mimic the fact that mushrooms and mycelium networks actually, they do what's best for the whole of the community. They're not looking at just one individual and sending extra resources to that one individual. This is a democratized sort of, we're all in it together, we're all connected. And I think we have something to learn from that as humans.
Yeah. So District 216 is like the mushroom, and what you're trying to create is the mycelium.
Well said.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do they find out more about District 216? Where do they go?
Sure. So I recommend that everybody that's interested signs up on our newsletter, because we do send it out every week with what events are coming up and some other interesting information. District216.com, just scroll to the bottom. We have a newsletter sign up down there. And then also, we're pretty active on Instagram. That seems to be the place that most people connect with us. I think it's District216 official on Instagram. We're on other social platforms too, but most of that content is sort of like repurposed from our Instagram content. So I would say those are the two best ways, is our newsletter and our Instagram.
Great. And have you seen the membership growing quickly? Okay.
Yeah, it's taken some time.
The mycelium is growing?
But now the mycelium is starting to take root, and both on the guests and the members. It's been amazing.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you once again for listening. After today's discussion with Jacob, I definitely feel more knowledgeable about psilocybin and District 216. I hope you found it enlightening as well. We missed the marquee event on May 18th, but don't worry, there are many more events scheduled, including the weekly Wednesday night meetups. To find out more about District 216, just go to district216.com. And if you enjoyed today's show, please like, follow, and subscribe, and share to help us continue exploring and celebrating the remarkable individuals that make Santa Barbara a community.